Hello and welcome to the Northern Souls podcast. I'm your host Zeke and I am joined by my lovely wife Keagan.
Hello.
And the purpose of this podcast will be to discuss, explore, and educate others on Norse paganism. Ultimately, our goal is to find the good life. So, I think a subject that I want to talk about today is what does it mean to be a Norse pagan? What does it mean to be a heathen? And just kind of over this past week is just something that I've been thinking about a lot. Is just trying to solidify my beliefs, what they are, how it's different from other belief sets. Because one thing that I've seen a lot in a lot of the pagan community is a lot of people are eclectic, meaning that
They mix a whole bunch of different religions together.
well, they kind of base things off of their own personal experiences alone. Just their personal spiritual experiences. Like there isn't a historical foundation for their beliefs. And they do tend to mix and match a lot from different various pantheons of deities. Like I've seen people who simultaneously will worship Loki and other Egyptian gods and goddesses, and you have some of the more traditional people who stick to history and history alone, and you kind of see those two dichotomies, and I'm not sure how much of a fan I am of them. I will disclose my personal bias. I am personally not a fan of the eclectic way of doing things. That being said, that doesn't mean that I, have a problem with people as individuals who identify as that. It's just
That's not what you do personally.
right. Like I do lean more traditional as far as having historical sources. But that being said, I tried to do things in such a way that work in today's world, assuming our pre-Christian ancestors never converted, what would their beliefs and practices look like today? And that's kind of what I'm trying to do, because as we've said many times before, there's a number of things that they used to do that we really can't do anymore, no matter how we feel about it. And there are certain practices that they did that, even if we could do it, I wouldn't, Like we know for a fact they practice slavery for obvious reasons. That's not okay. I'm not cool with that.
That's good.
We also know that they would expose babies who were either too weak to make it, like they had some visible deformity, or if they could not afford to raise the child. And that's something I'm totally opposed to now,
Again, that's a good thing.
Yes. I see that as a natural progression of beliefs, because I do understand the rationale for all of those practices back when they were widely practiced, but that simply no longer exists today. Barring the legal implications of doing that stuff. There's something also that's been kind of bothering me, and it's just how to really properly be a Norse pagan. And I know that's a really sketchy thing to say.
You're setting rules again.
I know, but I believe that people are able to identify as things, as to put labels on themselves, and then actually live by those labels. Like, how would I maybe put that? Because the habit I always go back to is Christianity, just because it's culturally dominant. And everybody knows that Bible thumping Christian who's all about Jesus and the Lord and the Bible, but doesn't follow a single tenet of that belief set, but they're all about it. And then there's the actual Christian who actually follows, what the Bible says, or they're at least true to their beliefs. I'm not here to get into a theological debate, but that's probably the best way I can describe it. They're true to themselves and their beliefs. They're honest. They're genuine. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. And if we want to be true to our ancestors' way as much as we can.
I would say, one, you can't be Christian and Norse pagan at the same time.
Oh, yeah, they're totally opposed. Well,
but you know that there are people who try to do that.
Yeah. Well, if that's your thing, okay. But, I mean, just from the Christian point of view, like, that's an issue,
Well,
yeah.
And I know for me personally, I think if you identify as a Norse pagan, that's what you should be. I honestly think, unless you have different ancestral ties to different pantheons or whatever, that's one thing. But if you're saying you're a Norse pagan, but you also dabble in Egyptian worship or Celtic stuff or all that stuff, I think that's a little bit disrespectful, in my own opinion.
Yeah. Like, it just doesn't sit right with me. Yeah. And, like, especially as Americans, I mean, we're all a mixed bag, Right. Like, I mean, I've got Germanic ancestry, Celtic ancestry, like, pretty much all of Northwestern Europe I descend from, and there's a lot of Americans who are in that same boat. In fact, I think you would struggle to find an American whose ancestors only come from, like, right. one place. Like, good luck with that, But I think mostly what I'm personally thinking about is, in order to be, like, true to your ancestors' ways, I think we have to really have a conversation about modernity and specifically modern technology and how that changes things. Mm-hmm. I think that requires an honest debate about that, because technology has evolved so much to the point that we don't need to live in harmony with nature. We can do whatever we want.
Well, you don't have to make anything handmade or work with your own hands, basically.
Yeah, and, like, I think a lot of people have found out, especially for lockdowns during the pandemic. I mean, well, this might be bad for your mental health. Technology and modernity has evolved in such a way that, theoretically speaking, you'll never need to leave your house in order to survive. Like, you can have goods shipped to your door, as long as
you can have your groceries brought to your door.
Well, yeah, and, like, as long as you're, like, working from home and have an internet connection, that's something that's theoretically possible. And obviously, that's never been a thing ever in human history. And I think when technology, like, progresses that much, I think we kind of need to have an honest and open discussion about what that entails for paganism. Because my personal opinion, so take that for what it's worth, is that to truly be pagan, to truly connect with our ancestors' ways, you kind of have to be out in the country, like out in nature a lot. If you're living in a city, you're essentially living in a concrete jungle, and you're cut off from land spirits, you're cut off from nature, you're cut off from all of that. And this isn't me, like, saying, oh, you're not truly pagan if you live in a city. I live in a city,
That's the goal.
Right.
Just to get back to nature, because in Norse paganism specifically, they have a whole thing to do with nature spirits, right?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that, like, all technology is bad, all civilization is bad. Obviously, they had civilizations, they had cities.
People evolve. That's just the way humans work.
Yeah, but there's a big but in there, like I was saying earlier, the population has exploded. More people today, at least in the U.S., live in cities than they do in rural areas. We used to be an agricultural society, an agrarian society. Now, like, where, like, 90% of the population were farmers and 10% was, like, other. And now it's flip-flopped, where only 10% of the population are farmers. And I think
and that's only changed within the last
not even 200 years.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. But I think that merits an honest discussion, like, if we are going to try to pursue our ancestral path, then I think that kind of means that in some ways, as much as I hate to say this word, we should regress. And by that, what I mean is move to a simpler life.
Well,
You know?
like I brought up to you the other day, it's like the American dream, even when we were growing up and before that, it was to get a corporate job
Yeah.
and live in a big city, have the perfect house, perfect family, and have all the technology and have nothing to worry about in life and have everything done and made for you. Well, today, like, there's been a big shift that's currently shifting anyway in our generation and those younger, that now the American dream is almost becoming to, have a cabin in the woods,
Yeah.
have your own garden, and shut off from all of the technology and the busyness of, corporate culture and just the 9 to 5 job. And I think that's just, it's telling you that people want to get back to, going back to their roots and actually having meaning and building things with their own hands and learning things every day. Not having this schedule and this, work life that you have to stick to, that you have to listen to. It's, well, they want to, create something with their own life.
Yeah, want to build something that actually means something instead of, working for some big corporation, making money for some rich jerk and not even,
who doesn't even know your name.
Yeah, and then not even get fairly compensated for it. Who wants that? Like, who wants to participate in this rat race? I think it's taken a toll on a lot of people, on their mental health, on their spiritual health, on their physical health too, because I think to fill in the gaps in their spiritual life, they'll engage in unhealthy habits. They'll overeat. They drink too much, or they don't exercise enough, which again impacts their physical life as well. And I think it's creating a spiritual sickness, besides all the implications from the physical health, and I think there's great value to be had in seeking to build something that's yours with your own 2 hands, to grow your own food, raise your family, raise your animals, to not have to rely on other people to give you those things. Because that was the big thing that we found out with the pandemic was America is not immune to shortages, where we walk into grocery stores and for the first time in our lives, shelves are empty,
No bread, no toilet paper, all of that.
And that's just wild to our mind, what? This can't happen in America? What? And the pandemic taught me that I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to be in a position where I have to rely on somebody else to help me pay my bills, keep a roof over my head, and clothes on my back. I want that individual sovereignty over my life.
Well, it's and that's basically what our ancestors did. And so the whole point is if you get away from the city and you can actually be self-sustaining, you're getting a closer connection to what our ancestors actually did and believed in. Now, that's also not saying you can't have a community. We're not saying that at all.
Well, because I think that's part and parcel with it. We're just talking about I want my piece of land, and then my neighbor's gonna have their piece of land too, and we're all just next to each other and stuff.
So I just want to make it clear, we're not saying cut everybody out of your life and live on your own.
Yeah, be that crazy mountain man. We're not saying that. Yeah,
we're just saying you need to bring back some self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
Or even community values, because trade can still be a valuable thing.
Absolutely.
And your neighbors we can all help each other out. That's the goal.
Well, speaking of community, have you met many communities in the city? All those people, no one's talking to each other, the civil society, especially in cities, is virtually dead at this point, which is oxymoronic, because it's you would think with all those people living in one spot, there'd be oodles and oodles of community to be had, but I'm personally not seeing it.
Yeah, that's I saw a thing the other day that said basically in the number of people that you pass on your way to work are more people than someone in the medieval times would have seen in their entire lifetime.
Yeah.
And you don't know any of those people on the road. basically. Like, how wild is that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of crazy to think about, you know. But I think it's also a really good point, you know. All these people around you and you have no connections to anybody, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sad and frankly backwards, but in a strange way to be expected, because I've seen it. I read somewhere that human beings can only really know 200 people, like, and that's when their knowledge of people starts to wane, you know. And when you think back to our ancestors' time, like that was probably as big as some communities got, was like 200 people
At
you
most.
know. Yeah. You know, God, like I think to really follow this way, like we kind of need to back to that. Well, and I was even thinking about it the other day, like the root word for pagan, it's Latin. And that's what the Romans, after they started to Christianize, called the country folk. Like that was their way of calling them bumpkins, for clinging to, you know, the old ways, the old religion.
Mm-hmm. For staying in the small communities and not living in a big city.
Yeah, yeah, and then just clinging to what they thought as superstitions, you know? And as much of an insult as that was supposed to be, I do think that, you know, if you really want to connect to this way, maybe that's something you should look into. Look into living a simpler life. Look into living in a small town with people you know. You know?
Well, it's like also I think it should be said, like, obviously we live in a town, right? Like in a city right now. Like we are not in the small knit community that we eventually want to be in.
Right.
However, we do feel like that's going to be something in the future that we're working towards. Like, we know we're not telling you to drop everything and just go into a cabin in the woods. Like, that's not what we're saying.
Yeah, because that's just not realistic for a lot of people. Well, because, like, even if we wanted to, like, I don't know, start homesteading right now, and even if we could, like, get the nice piece of land, we do not have the skills to, like, actually make that work.
However, we will work our way towards that. Yeah, it's going to take years to be in a place that we're like, yes, this is where we want to be. But as long as you actually set a goal in mind and you continuously work towards it, that's what our ancestors and the gods and goddesses are going to respect at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, and I think it'll be easier to respect yourself if you accomplish something that awesome. Because I understand how hard it is to go back to that. Because living in the city, living this way where everything's just provided for you and it's just so easy to get all your food. It's easy. And like we are wired to do what's easy because then that greatly increases our chances of survival. And we're hardwired to do it. And it's hard to take that risk, to venture into the unknown. But I think it's exciting in the same vein. And I think it speaks a lot to one's courage to just boldly go back to that way. You know, it takes a lot. And I think that's ultimately what would be best for spiritual health. You know, and it's scary. And like, I've kind of told people before, like, that's ultimately my dream, right? And the first thing they all do is try to talk me out of it. Just try to tell me about how hard everything is going to be, about how you're going to be working all the time, how you're going to be doing this, you're going to be doing that. Oh my God, you know. And to me, that just tells me how afraid they are to leave.
Yeah.
You know, that's not anything on me. Like, I understand I'm going to be working a lot more, but again, it's going to be for me and providing for me and my family and on things that I own that are mine and no one else's. No one can take that from me. And I think that provides its own value. And I think when you bring up this kind of stuff with other people and they react in that way, I think on some level they understand that. And they also understand they're not willing to go there. So they want to keep you in
their bubble.
In their bubble, yeah. I was going to use naughty words. But yeah, in their bubble. You know?
It's just, change has to start somewhere. There's always going to be people who are naysayers, think you're crazy, but you just got to take that leap and do what you feel is right. And what we feel is right is getting back to that simpler way.
Yeah, because, you know, again, to reiterate, I mean, I just don't think you connect to the gods to our ancestors and to like the land spirits.
With all that noise.
With all that noise, like, I mean, we're trying to sleep at night. If we keep the window open, it's constant noise. Like, it's not quiet. And like, that's what we want, is that peace and that quiet, to be able to hear yourself think, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm just not convinced that if anybody claims to be a pagan but refuses to get out of the city, I think they need to reevaluate their values and what they think. Like, if they want to continue to claim that, I'm not saying they can't. And I'm not saying, you know, people should go around saying, you know, no true pagan, whatever, you know. And I know this probably sounds a little self-contradictory, but this is just kind of my opinion. Like, I'm not going to force anybody to do this. This is just what I believe and what I think, you know. And
how we feel.
Yeah, and again, this is the purpose of the podcast, is for me to put out what I think and advocate for stuff. And hey, if you like it, great. And if you don't, that's cool too, you know.
Right.
Like, it's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, if you guys want to contribute to the conversation, we always read comments and would love to converse.
Yes. Yeah. Anyways, and until next time.
Bye.